Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to FOBtv, the future of business. It is here, this podcast, where we explore the forces shaping tomorrow. I'm your host, Kevin Benedict. I'm a futurist and lecturer here at TCS. And again, thank you for joining the program. In this episode, our focus is the Arctic North, and specifically the Nordic North. And I've reached out to a previous guest who we had on earlier this year, Hanna Lakkala. Hanna, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation. Great to be here.
Yes, yeah, so Hanna's, let me introduce her. She's a futurist. She's a futures coach. And I think she's the only futurist that lives in the Arctic North. What do you think about that introduction? Is that true?
Well, at least I haven't met other futurist in the Arctic region. So I'm pretty confident to say that at least in the north of Finland, Sweden, Norway, I'm probably the only futurist.
Well, so I'm glad you're on the program today. That's terrific here. So where are you calling in from today, and what's the weather like?
I'm in a small town called Tornio in the Tornio Valley region. It's actually right at the Finnish-Swedish border. I grew up here on both sides of the Finnish-Swedish border, moved back north 5 years ago. It's actually really dark right now, midwinter. It's going to be the winter solstice in a couple of days. We do have snow, maybe a couple of minus degrees. A few days ago, it was minus 25. So minus 2, 3 is pretty nice.
Wow. So let's talk about weather while we're on that. Have you seen a change in weather patterns over the last, let's say, 20 years?
Yeah. I mean, especially the winters are more like the weather and temperature fluctuates much more in the winter these days. Like last winter, it was some days like 0 degrees, some days minus 30, then back to 0. So it's fluctuating much more. And the winters are a bit shorter than they used to be. So you can definitely see the difference. And summers are a bit hotter as well, especially July. So yeah, you can see the change, definitely.
So for those of you that are listening today who are not familiar with Lapland and Finland and the Arctic North, all that kind of stuff here, Hanna, give us a brief geography lesson, if you would.
Sure. Where to begin? Well, I talk about the Nordic Arctic, so the north of Finland, Sweden, Norway, which is my home. In tourism terms, I guess these days, this region is called Lapland, Finnish, Swedish, Norwegian, Lapland. But yeah, we are around the Arctic Circle, so kind of same latitudes as Alaska, but it's not quite as cold here as in Alaska because of the Gulf Stream. So we do get some mild weather, mild winds from the Gulf Stream. So it's not quite as extremely cold as in Alaska. What else? Our population density is very low, around 2 or maximum 3 persons per square kilometer. The big towns here are mostly along the coast, where there's some industry, universities mainly along the coast, with few exceptions. But most of the region is very sparsely populated.
So Finland borders Russia on the western side, right?
Eastern.
Or the western side of Russia, yeah. Eastern side of Finland, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And Finland is directly north of what?
Finland is north of Estonia. To the west, there's Sweden. And actually part of Norway is on top of Finland.
All right. Thank you for sharing all that with us. So let's talk about those forces of change that you've been watching and studying and writing about there. What are some of the major ones that you're watching right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great systemic changes going on in the Arctic, in the Nordic Arctic region, like many megatrends and tensions that are shaping the future of the region, especially like the geopolitics, like militarization of the North, the so-called new resource rush related to the so-called green transition, of course, climate change, also tourism growth, and changing demographics and changes of the welfare state. And of course, this is all a like system. Like us futurists love to think about systems. Everything's related. And so are also these big trends together shaping the futures of the region.
So talk to us about some of the geopolitical things that you watch now.
Yeah. Well, you could talk about the return of geopolitics to the north after several decades or after the probably the Second World War. We have moved from the margin to the strategic core again here in the north. With the NATO expansion, Finland and Sweden joined just recently during the past few years, the NATO. We also made the DCA agreements with the US. So much more military presence, discussions related to border security and critical infrastructure. Yeah, but this brings, on the other hand, investments and attention, but also tension and worry of different kinds. So there are some people who see the possibilities with the dual use of products and services, but there's also a lot of worry from the locals. Like the key question when it comes to the geopolitics and militarization of the North is that what does NATO and especially the DCA agreement with the US does to Lapland, to the Arctic? I mean, we don't even know because these documents are, secret. So how does it shape our way of life? How does it affect our nature, our livelihoods? Can it destroy our, limit to our nature and limit our access to nature? For us in the Nordics, something called every man's right, like the free to roam in the nature is very important. So there's kind of worry, like, will this military development change our way of life and access to nature? And and of course, you think like, who sets the terms of development? Local actors or external powers? So how will this militarization of our region change our lives and livelihoods? So these kind of questions, and these are the questions we talk about here.
So let's dig a little deeper into this geopolitical. I think you use the term strategic core. The Nordic North has returned to the strategic core. Why? What has happened geopolitically that has now focused all this attention on the Arctic North?
Yeah, well, especially with the Russia invading Ukraine, obviously Finland has also a long border with Russia. And well, of course, there's the American military has its interest towards our border to be closer to Russian border. And I guess globally, there's more interest towards the Arctic region to be present here, to have, access to the rare earth metals and other resources we have here. So I think it's partly a question of geopolitics and also about resource extraction.
I also read in preparation for our podcast today, the fact that the weather's changing may in fact open up more Nordic logistics routes for ships, which could save huge amounts of money, because rather than going around the wide part of the world, we could go over the top to more destinations. And that, in fact, would save a great deal of money to be able to move products through these new pathways that open up because of changing weather. Do you see evidence of that kind of attention in your part of the world?
Yeah, there are discussions about that as well, but I guess it's also a lot about the interest towards the resources that you will be able to access once the top of the world melts. I'm guessing it's both Russia and China and US who's interested in those resources that become accessible when the ice is melting.
So along that same kind of discussion, headlines here a few months ago said that the U.S. has now purchased 4 large ice-breaking ships from Finland and contracted with Finland to help us build many more. Now, we haven't focused on building icebreakers as a country, but suddenly we have this keen interest to having ice-breaking ships. Was that also in your news cycles?
Yeah, I mean, we are pretty good at building icebreakers. So there's been a lot of focus on that the past months. But there's, on the other hand, also discussions about, what are we enabling when we're selling the icebreakers to the US? Because obviously the politics have switched in the US as well. And there's a lot of global, instability. So there's, pros and cons with everything. On the other hand, we get to sell our icebreakers and our, expertise. But on the other hand, we're not really sure what kind of future possibilities those icebreakers will enable or open.
So another topic, of course, has been here for the last year or so is, surprisingly, Greenland is in the news cycle quite regularly. So when the U.S. originally floated the idea of buying Greenland, nobody wanted that, but most people just kind of laughed it. But why do you think there's those overtures by the superpowers around the world now to get more active in those regions? You mentioned rare earth minerals. Are there other things that makes those areas more strategically important?
Yeah, I think it's, partly about that, having the access to the rare earth minerals, but also about the militarization of the Arctic, who has the power in the Arctic region, who controls the Arctic region. So I guess it's both the resources and power. That's how I see it.
So are there other things that you're studying and writing about that you see as kind of forces of change? Are there areas around economics or societal that are important that you're watching very closely?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, the green transition, that's definitely one big thing that's shaping the future of the Arctic. Mining the rare earth metals and battery minerals, but also like wind power parks. Yeah, there's a lot going on. Well, the core attention here is that the green transition does not reduce resource extraction, nor does it really reduce consumption. I mean, it just reframes the consumption to something new. So what a lot of researchers and people here, locals here, are worried about is like, are we destroying our biodiversity in the name of green growth? And what is actually green growth? So there's a discussion about the local environments, about livelihoods of the locals. For example, reindeer herding, how all these mines and wind parks affects reindeer herding and local livelihoods, cultural continuity. But on the other hand, others see opportunities. Like in every big trend, others see opportunities and others see threats. And like I mentioned, we do have industry here as well along the coast, especially like steel production. So there's a lot of discussions about green steel, and they are actually building steel factories where they want to produce fossil-free steel. But yeah, where do you get the energy to produce all this, to produce the batteries, to produce the fossil-free electricity? It comes from somewhere, and somebody, needs to have all those wind parks in their backyard or those mines. So there's a lot of tension. And of course, it comes to values. We have different kinds of values. So based on whose values are we going to reshape our future? This is kind of questions that we have here. But also tourism. Tourism is actually growing a lot. It is a considerable part of our economy here, and it's still growing. There's even mass tourism already in certain parts. So a lot of the discussions evolve also around tourism and what are the limits to sustainable tourism actually. But it really depends on which part of the region you are. In some parts, it's just mass tourism. Other parts are just welcoming more tourism because it's good for the economy. And of course, it brings a lot of business opportunities. But yeah, and also it brings some downsides like Airbnb is getting bigger and bigger, which means that the prices of rental housing is forcing locals to move. So here you have another type of, push and pull and tension between shifts. And other thing I want to mention is the kind of everyday life in transition in the north. Like demographics is changing, the population is getting older, the tourism-driven economy takes a lot of seasonal labor here, a lot of international workers here. So there's a lot going on, but also the changes in the welfare states. Like we are also losing public services in a region with large distances. So there's a lot of different kind of tensions going on here and systemic changes that shape the possible futures of the region.
And on the notion of tensions, the border with Russia, which used to be very active economically, of people crossing back and forth and buying things and selling things, that's a closed border now, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a closed border now since a couple of years ago. Yeah, I mean, I'm not close to Russian border, so I don't really see that in my everyday life. I'm at the Swedish border, but yeah, they closed the border a couple of years ago, and basically all the traffic stops.
And so that's going to create additional tension to find other sources of revenue and to readjust and restructure the economy, because that's a closed opportunity now, right?
Yeah. And for municipalities and businesses in the eastern part of Finland, it's obviously been a really big shock and affected the economy really heavily.
So you guys have a unique climate, weather patterns, a lot of darkness in the winter, a lot of light in the summer. How does that impact society, emotional, physical, and mental health in your region? And are there changes or forces of change around those areas as well?
Yeah, I guess it depends. Some people do say they suffer from the darkness, but I have to say that these days, I just told my mother the other day that actually these days I don't really think about it. I'm just, it's more about accepting what is. Mm-hmm. If you complain about something, then it starts affecting you. But if you just accept that this is the place I live in the world and this is how it is here, and you accept it, you make the best out of it, then I guess that's my way of making it through the winter.
Yeah, and if you don't like it, leave.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I told myself when I decided to move back north 5 years ago, that, okay, if I don't like the darkness, I can always leave.
Now, Hanna has had the opportunity to be in South America. She's been able to be in Asia at different times in her career. So you've really seen the world, and you made a conscious choice to move back to Lapland.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I love it. No regrets at all. I'm living the perfect life for me here,
Yes.
Being back to my roots, having all these nature and outdoors possibilities, being close to my family. So I really enjoy life here. And I enjoy the quiet pace here and the silence.
That's beautiful. So I must ask, do you take advantage of the saunas?
Oh, totally. I mean, I have my sauna, this sauna in every house here.
So is that a daily ritual, or is that 3 days a week or 1 day a week?
I guess traditionally it was like 1 day a week. Like Saturdays used to be sauna days. When I was a child, actually, Saturday was always this sauna evening.
Yes.
I do go to sauna maybe 2 or 3 times a week, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Matter of fact, I think it's kind of catching on here in the U.S. too. I mean, even Costco and some of these big box retailers, they all have a full line of saunas that you can buy for your home.
Yeah. I mean, sauna culture is obviously getting really big in North America, both in the US and Canada. I actually have a Finnish friend in Vancouver region who's into the sauna business, and she's helping, Finnish wellness companies, especially sauna businesses, to establish in the North American markets. And there's like these sauna festivals and events of all kinds. And we're like, I asked her, like, do people in North America really understand how personal sauna is to Finns? And she said that no, they don't. They really don't. Because to Finns, sauna is as personal as it would be to comment somebody's weight. That's how personal it is to us. I mean, if you're going to talk about sauna outside of Finland, you need to know how to build a proper sauna if you're going to call it sauna. I mean, it's very sensitive to us.
Wow. So tell us about some of that. It almost sounds like a spiritual experience.
It is almost like a spiritual experience. Well, it has to be hot, like hot. Yeah. Otherwise, it's not a sauna. And there are certain, instructions that how you build a proper sauna to make it hot. And you're naked in sauna. And that has nothing to do with sexuality to us. It's just a normal thing. You're naked in sauna.
Yeah.
They're usually quite silent. It's like a silent space. You don't eat there. You don't read there. You can drink something, but you just relax. But yeah, it has to be hot. That's the main thing that most people outside of Finland miss.
I was watching a video on YouTube the other day about how to make a Finn angry. And it showed people laughing loudly and talking in a sauna. It showed them shaking their protein drinks really loud and guzzling protein drinks in a sauna. All these things that make a Finn angry.
Totally. Totally true.
All right. So then is there branches of trees that are involved? Is that a Finnish thing?
What do you mean?
Where you would hit yourself with branches?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Of course. In the summer. Yeah, with birch. You have
why birch and why in the summer?
Because that's when you have the birch. Of course, some people do make a lot of them, these birch bouquets, whatever you call them. You make them in the summer and you can freeze them. So yeah, some people freeze them for the winter. But of course, in the summer, you can pick them freshly.
What's special about birch in a sauna?
I think the smells, the oils, the aromatic oils that comes out of it must be something to do with that.
Wow. Yeah. Well, there's a whole lot for the rest of us to learn about the sauna culture. Hanna, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing this extraordinary life of yours in the North Nordic region.
Thank you.